All right. So, who here wants to look or feel younger? Yeah, right? Yeah, it's a loaded question because I think that's everyone's desire at heart. And there's always been this human desire for wanting to live longer or even achieve immortality. If you look at where it comes from Greek mythology. So it's something that's just ingrained in our DNA of always wanting to live longer. But we're finally in an era where the science is saying, hey, this might actually be something that we can cure. And what I'm talking about is aging as a disease. So it's really interesting. And I think the regenerative medicine is going to be the reason for the cure. And I'll explain why as we go into it. But regenerative medicine at a very high level is basically just using cell therapies or gene therapies. So, for example, you're combining these two to restore the body back to a healing state. So there's so many different ways to do this because it's a very broad definition. But the idea is instead of taking a pharmaceutical and suppressing something or just taking a symptom management, we're actually trying to fix the root cause. And why can we do this now as opposed to 10 years ago is because the technology has evolved dramatically. And the reason why it's not mainstream is because, unfortunately, if you're a standard of care doctor, you go to once a year, pharma-sponsored usually, education seminars, and you learn about the latest drugs, and you learn about the latest guidelines. And that's just how medicine is. There's a lot wrong with that now because medicine has changed so much. And also the diseases that we're treating has changed. We're not treating acute trauma. The big problem is chronic disease, right? Is people living with chronic illnesses, and giving them a pill doesn't solve that. The perfect example is most people have probably heard of rheumatoid arthritis, right? Like it's an autoimmune condition. It can be pretty devastating. It's basically where your own body starts attacking your joints. And so what do doctors do? Of course, being a good doctor, you're like, let's stop your body from attacking your joints. So let's suppress your immune system. They do this using steroids, such as prednisone, or biologics, which are basically drugs designed to, again, block your immune system. And these can work, but then they have a host of side effects. And again, do you want to just intuitively, if you think about it, do you want to just block something and stop it, or do you want to bring it back into balance? And that's what these therapies do. They bring your body back into balance. They restore function. And so the pinnacle of the cell therapies that do this are these amazing cells that were discovered in Japan in 2008. So that's almost 16, 17 years now, but unfortunately the rest of the world didn't really find out about it. There's many reasons. I could go a whole lecture just on that, but the gist of it is that there was another professor named Yamanaka who discovered something called induced pluripotent stem cells, and in 2006, and he won the Nobel Prize in 2012, and so he got all the attention, and there was a lot of taxpayer money that went into his research, and Professor Mari Dozawa, who's the other Japanese scientist, discovered these cells. And then there's this kind of like stem cell beef between these two scientists. It's like, my stem cells are better than your stem cells. And so, as you can imagine, unfortunately, the male, because it's also a patriarchal society in Japan, who won the Nobel Prize, won that battle, basically. So he essentially suppressed her information, and her work never really got outside of Japan. And I was really the first doctor, I think, to talk about it when I discovered them just, like a year and a half ago, really. And then now there's more and more excitement about it because I've done it for some big celebrities, which we'll talk about in a sec, but more so that she's already established in Japan the amazing properties of these cells. So these cells are in your body right now. And what are they doing? They're fixing things as they're breaking down. And what do I mean by that? Your body is constantly going through cell division. Just right now, in the last 5 minutes I've talked, you've had millions of cells die and renew. So every time they die and they renew, they go through an aging process. They accumulate damage. So you have two types of DNA. You have nuclear DNA and mitochondrial DNA. And the way I like to think about it is imagine you have trillions of buildings in your body that are constantly breaking down, so being demolished and then building back up. And then that new version of that building over time isn't as good as the original building. Why is that? Is because the instructions to tell the workers to make that building are being damaged. So imagine you're a construction worker and you get these instructions, you have to read the book and say, okay, I need to make this framing, I need to make this building, but that instructions in the book start getting damaged. So that's really what aging is. Hopefully that makes sense. So at a very simple level, aging is just accumulation of damage of the instructions of DNA. Okay, and then there's just mitochondrial and nuclear DNA, and those are two types of DNA in your cells. And why is that's important to understand? Because then, okay, now we understand what is aging, so how do we reverse it? So we need to reverse the damage of the DNA. So at a very simple level, how do we do that? There's so many people talking, about NMN and IV NAD, and these are all interventions that are for the mitochondrial DNA. That's why people talk about them, because they help your mitochondria to work better. But what would be better than just making your mitochondria work better? It would be to give you new mitochondria. And that's what mu cells do. And this is the closest thing we have at this moment in time on the planet to do what's called mitochondrial transplantation. And they do this through this little tunneling effect, which is well studied and published, which is pretty amazing. And they basically transfer the new mitochondria DNA, which doesn't have any damage, to your body. And so you're probably wondering, okay, how does a cell integrate this donor DNA into my body? It does it through the logic of the tissue. So it kind of knows how, which sounds, kind of crazy and sci-fi-ish, but there's a specific process that goes on called epigenetic resetting, which is essentially the genes that are expressed by that new DNA match your own body's DNA. So because obviously people always get concerned, am I going to take this donor DNA and I'm going to start getting their DNA in my body and my DNA is going to change? So no, because there's epigenetic resetting process. So just to understand that this is very safe to have donor DNA in your body, even though it's not related or your own child. So that's the first thing. And this is well published in many clinical trials because, for example, one of the clinical trials they did in Japan was for stroke. So they had a bunch of stroke patients and they just did the IV mu cells, and a lot of them got off disability. 25% of them had reversal of gray hair, which was pretty unbelievable. And that's just with one infusion, right? You can do as many infusions as you need to really get people better. And it was a relatively low dose too, which was just 20 million. Sometimes we do up to like 60 million or even 100 million, just to put that in context. And so essentially, the mu cells were able to find their way to the brain and regenerate new neurons. And the way we know this is because 6-7 years later, these patients are still doing well. And so if the cells did not integrate and regenerate new neurons, then of course the cells would have died and they would have been back in a wheelchair or they would have become disabled again. But that didn't happen. So that just shows you the ability of these cells to integrate into the host safely. And what I say here is pluripotency, which is basically their ability to turn into any cell type in the body. So they can turn into any of the 200 cell types. So they're really the ultimate cell because, and the beauty of them is they don't cause cancer. Because the problem with other pluripotent stem cells, because you can also get pluripotent stem cells from embryonic. Do people vaguely remember when George Bush Jr., he banned stem cells in America? And that was because of the ethical debate around using them from aborted fetuses. So, of course, if you're aborting a fetus and you're taking the stem cells from there, yes, they may be powerful, but number one, there's ethical issues. And number two, it turns out that those embryonic stem cells can cause cancer because they grow uncontrollably. It's called uncontrolled proliferation. But mu cells are pluripotent, which means they can turn into any cell type, but they are non-tumorigenic. So they are inherently, by definition, non-cancerous causing, just by what's called the cell surface markers. And again, there's almost 20 years of data showing their safety as well. And then the other thing that's important to understand is their stress endurance. So this means they survive in the body. The problem with 99% of, because there's so many stem cell clinics out there saying, stem cells are going to fix everything, but what they don't tell you is that the stem cells they're putting in your body, 95% of them will die. So most of them don't survive. And if they're not surviving, then what are the results going to be like? They're going to be mixed. Some people get better, some people don't. So how do you get consistent results? You use these cells, which are actually going to survive and do what they're supposed to, which, as we said, is to reverse DNA damage and to restore cell function. And so that's why mu cells, we get much more consistent results than the old generation of stem cells, which are referred to as mesenchymal stem cells, which a lot of clinics are still using. And I was using them too a couple years ago, but now the technology has improved. And so why wouldn't you evolve your technology to match the science? And obviously understanding the science, you understand that these have a lot more potential and therapeutic effects than the old generation of stem cells. And then the selective homing, that just is what I talked about. Like in the stroke trial, it's not like they injected the stem cells into the brain, they just did them intravenously, and they found their way to the brain. So again, this sounds like science fiction, but it's because the brain sends a signal saying, help me, there's a problem here, and the mu cells sense that, and they go there. So they're what I call a smart living drug. They know they can sense their microenvironment, figure out the problem, and restore cell function. It almost sounds too good to be true, but I can tell you Professor Dezawa has over 50 patents on the different applications for mu cells. It's unbelievable. And this is just the beginning of the clinical trials and everything that's going to be found out about them in the in the next couple years. So this is a video showing how they integrate into the body, which I can explain. Oh wait, do I click some? Is there a technical guy here? I was hoping the video would play because it would then. Thank you, Rana. Is there like a play button? Thank you. So, those are the mu cells, and they basically find the damaged tissue, so the damaged cells, and they eat them. It's called phagocytosis. So, for example, imagine they go to the brain, the neurons, and they eat the damaged neurons, and then they use the logic of the tissue and the transcription factors and the epigenetic resetting I was talking about to integrate into the host and then turn into a new neuron. And in this case, they're showing it turning into a new blood vessel. So how cool is that? And imagine if you put them in the face, because I know everyone always cares about cosmetics, you can turn into new skin cells, and you can make your face younger. You better believe I do it for my face. But it's actually becoming a very popular facial. So anyway, it's going to be the next generation facial after the vampire facial and everything. So essentially, what we're doing is, in this case, when you grow cells, they grow in a soup. So that soup, the broth, so to speak, is called the exosomes. So the exosomes have all the nutrients in there. They have all the growth factors. They have microRNAs, cytokines. Basically, these are all signals, but there's no cells in there. And the reason for this is just ease of convenience, and they're cheaper than cells there because stem cells are still quite expensive because of the manufacturing. So for some people who want a cheaper alternative that may not be as effective but can still be useful, exosomes can still be an option. Now, just to give you context, the main difference is that, as we showed, those cells are regenerating new tissue, but these exosomes only stay in your body for a few hours to maybe a few days. So they go in there, they send their signals, they help with altered gene expression, reduce inflammation, oxidative stress. They do have a lot of positive effects, but they're very transient or temporary. So often with exosomes, you have to do them over and over. So just, coming back to the facial, if you do a facial with this mu cells, it can last for 2 to 3 years on the face, whereas exosomes, you have to do them 3 times, 1 month apart at least, and then you have to repeat it, every 6 months to a year to continue to see effects. So that's just, to give you some context of like what the strength differences between exosomes and stem cells. But that's not to say exosomes can't be useful, it's just different just different strength. And then the other thing too to understand is I used to use exosomes more personally before, but because the old stem cells were really signaling molecules, but the new stem cells are regenerative. So that's the big difference to understand. These reduce inflammation, but they're not regenerating new tissue, right? The mu cells are actually regenerating new tissue. And the old stem cells, if anyone tells you the old stem cells are regenerating tissue, they're lying to you. They do not regenerate tissue. They reduce inflammation, which can still be helpful. But exosomes do that as well, and they're safer. So that's just a general overview of the stem cell stuff. Obviously, there's a lot more. I'm sure people have questions, so I'll save time for that. But the other thing that we're doing, so that's cell therapy. And now let's talk a little bit about gene therapy. So gene therapy, most people have probably heard of CRISPR, CRISPR technology. It's kind of like where you cut out different genes and you kind of put them back together and you're editing your genome, so to speak. So CRISPR has an amazing potential, but it also has risks with it, which is that you can have off-site targets. Now, what the company I'm working with is called MiniCircle. So a MiniCircle, just imagine it's a plasmid. It's like a circular strand of DNA, which is derived from E. coli, from bacteria, but there's no bacteria in there. It's just kind of the backbone that allows us to insert whatever gene of interest that we want and add it to your body. So what I mean by vector is just that it's a way to add information to your body. So, for example, when you got the COVID vaccine, or if you were forced to get it or whatever, then there's something called a lipid nanoparticle vector, LPV, that they use for the mRNA. And that vector is how they put that mRNA into your body. And so there's different types of vectors. And the problem with just LPVs, for example, with the lipid nanoparticle vectors, is that they can migrate and they can stimulate your immune system. And that's why the COVID vaccine, unfortunately, has a lot of side effects for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but I've seen it for a lot of my patients that I try to help. And there's more and more research being published about the off-site targets and kind of the side effects of the COVID vaccine. And it's because, unfortunately, the vector that they used was new, and we just didn't really know that, hey, it's going to have all these downstream side effects. And so the vector we're using is called a plasmid vector, which has been around for almost 3 decades. And in humans, it's been tested for about a decade now, so it's still relatively new, but we know enough that the plasmid vector, what it does is it doesn't stimulate your immune system and it doesn't migrate. So it doesn't have those same risks that you see, for example, with the lipid nanoparticle vector. And so that's the reason why it's very safe, number one. And then number two, in terms of effectiveness, it depends on what we're putting on the vector. It's kind of like, you're trying to code what gene do we want to code onto the vector that we want to add to your body. And so follistatin was the first target for the company MiniCircle because it's a bioidentical peptide hormone, so meaning your body makes it naturally, and as you get older, the levels fall. Some people genetically may just have lower levels. And the very interesting thing is follistatin levels are the highest when you're pregnant. So I'm sure a lot of people have noticed, when women have that pregnancy glow, or they just feel good when they're pregnant, and they got their big tummies, but they're just like living their best life. It's because I think one of the reasons is because of follistatin. It has this really protective effect on your body. It reduces inflammation. It helps with strength and energy. And it's really, if you think about it, evolutionary. It kind of makes sense that you want the pregnant mom to be vital and strong when she's going through this really difficult, challenging time in her body. So, interestingly, follistatin is basically, as it says here, is essentially kind of the brake system. So meaning the higher your follistatin, the lower your myostatin. So, and myostatin sets a limit on how much muscle you can put on. So think about it this way. You're basically taking the brakes off a little bit. So it makes it easier to put on muscle. And why is that important? Because, as my friend Gabrielle Lyon likes to say, muscle is the organ of longevity. And that basically means that the more muscle you have, the longer you're going to live. And that's probably the best evidence we have when it comes to anything in terms of longevity. So if you can have more muscle on your body, that's going to be a great thing for you. And so that's why I'm a big fan of this peptide. And there are other peptides too that can be helpful, but this one specifically is a more advanced intervention because it's just one injection in your stomach or in your arm, and it lasts for 1 to 2 years. So it can be pretty incredible. And for elderly people especially, the elderly start to lose muscle at an accelerated rate, especially after age 60. So if you can do something to slow that down, that's going to be, I think, very powerful for longevity. Okay. This is just as a video. Oh, would you click for the... Thanks. Do you guys know Tony Robbins? He's a motivational speaker in the US. I've looked up to him since I was a kid, so it was very nice for him to make this video for me. Audio? Oh. I guess you can read the subtitles. There's no audio for some reason. The audio doesn't work? That's fine. That's fine. Okay. We can keep going.
I don't know which one it is.
Is there one? We need the technical guy. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, so this is just to show. To be honest, I don't care so much about celebrities, but I care the fact that the general public does, and it's the way to reach millions of people. For example, Chris has about 60 million followers on his Instagram, so he posted this on his Instagram. And when he did, the Daily Mail, I don't know, TMZ, all these different media outlets posted about me and him and about Mu cells. So now, all of a sudden, we go from no one knowing about Mu cells to millions, tens of millions of people knowing about Mu cells and getting curious. So that's the reason I like working with celebrities. I don't really care for them as I don't fanboy or anything, but it's just a cool way to reach more people. And it's also, for me, as someone who's trying to help and reach as many people, they're a good means to do that. And same thing with Zac. Zac Efron was another one who talked more specifically about his injury because he had chronic back pain. And it was especially, he did it, I don't know if you guys saw his movie in Iron Claw. He played as a wrestler, and he really went into that role and hurt his back, and he was having some chronic pain, and we were able to fix it and get him out of pain. And the big thing is we're able to avoid surgery too, because the only other option for him, when physiotherapy doesn't work and when pain medications don't work, if you go to your average doctor, they're going to tell you your only option is surgery. But obviously there's an intermediary option, and that's what we specialize in. So yeah, we kind of talked about exercise, of course, muscle being the organ of longevity. Methylene blue is one of my favorite, let's say, biohacks these days, I guess, because it's a very potent antioxidant. And just to go back to why we age, your body goes through cellular metabolism on a constant process, right? So right now, if you ate some food or your body has to turn that food into energy. And where does that happen? That happens in the mitochondria. And that mitochondria, as a byproduct of the energy metabolism, over time you get what are called free radicals. And these free radicals start damaging things in your body. They damage what are called the cell membranes, which are kind of the security system for those buildings I was talking about earlier. And then they damage the DNA, the mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA. This is called oxidative stress. So this oxidative stress over time is one of the root causes of aging. And in fact, they think, the scientists, the latest theory is that the mitochondria dysfunction is really the root cause of aging. And that's why there's so much interest in the mitochondria and what's called quantum biology, because anytime you have electrons being moved, that's a quantum phenomenon, right? And so I won't bore you with all the quantum mechanical stuff, but essentially there's going to be this intersection between quantum mechanics and biology, and that's what's really going to lead us to the next generation of therapeutics. There's in fact a group in Europe that's dedicated to this cause, and they're basically combining theoretical physicists with a bunch of biologists and longevity doctors to solve this problem using quantum mechanical principles. But the point is, when you're energy metabolism happens, your electrons have to go through this transport chain, and when that process becomes dysregulated or doesn't work as efficiently, that's because the mitochondria aren't working as efficiently. So methylene blue just helps to, as a sponge, so to speak, to help with the oxidative stress, those free radicals I was talking about that get produced. And it's something that I wouldn't necessarily take it on a daily basis, because you don't want to take too much of it, because there's a fine balancing act. Personally, I use it after flights, because commercial air travel especially induces a lot of oxidative stress in your body. And then otherwise, I just use it once or twice a week. There's other supplements, as I mentioned earlier. Most people have probably heard of NMN. There's a brand from Japan called Mirai, M-I-R-A-I. That's the one I recommend. Just a high quality one. And again, NMN is a supplement for your mitochondria. And that's a good one, I would say, that's worth taking probably on a daily basis if you're interested in aging. And then there's also peptides. There are a lot of peptides for mitochondria. There's peptide. People have heard of Ozempic, right? Ozempic became pretty popular, and of course people have heard of insulin. Those are both peptides. Those are a short chain of amino acids which basically just send a signal to your body to achieve a specific task. So insulin sends a message saying, hey, lower blood sugar. Ozempic or semaglutide sends a message saying, hey, eat less and feel kind of nauseous. And so it's not the most effective way to lose weight, but it does work for a lot of people. But there are better and more sophisticated peptides now. In fact, we have a third generation Ozempic we're using called retatrutide. And it works great because it doesn't really suppress your appetite, but it increases insulin sensitivity, and it also increases your body's ability to use sugar, so it's making your cells healthier. We always want to think about cellular health when we come to these interventions. So don't just think about, oh, this is working, but think about what is it doing to my cells. And that's the beauty of these peptides. We can understand that now. And so one of my favorite peptides for longevity is called SS31, because it's a peptide that helps with mitochondrial repair, which is called mitophagy. And so it basically helps the mitochondria to work more efficiently, and it's something you can cycle like 2 months on, 2 months off for longevity, and it can help with energy, and it can help with cellular metabolism. So for example, I'm sure most people have heard of the concept, as you get older, my metabolism slows down, right? It's like, why does it become harder and harder to lose weight? It's because your mitochondria aren't working as efficiently. So how can you make them work more efficiently? So that's one of the ways to do that, is to use these peptides. So you're not just using them for fat loss, you're actually making the underlying engine that helps with energy metabolism to work better. And I'll leave it at that, so we can do a Q&A. Oh, okay. Do you guys want to see the video? Okay, sure.
Practitioner, but he's also incredibly hungry and driven to constantly know what's on the cutting edge. And I'm talking about the cutting edge of regenerative medicine. And so I found it to be a consistent source of finding that cutting edge material. I'm on that cutting edge all the time myself, but he's brought things to me that I wasn't aware of happening yet. He's also really good at ferreting out what's real and what's more experimental still, and what really is worth, taking a healing journey on. So I've recommended Dr. Khan to several of my friends, and I think he does a phenomenal job.
What changes have you noticed so far since being treated by Dr. Khan?
Well, I saw Dr. Khan because I had to have surgery, and I avoid surgery like the plague, but I had a bone spur, and I was just going to do what's called PRP to tighten the ligaments, and then the bone spur usually would go away. But unfortunately, some bone chips got into my bicipital tendon, so I had to go through surgery, which is brutal. And when they took them out, they had to move the position of my biceps, so it attached in a different place on my shoulder. It's pretty extensive. And the pain was immense, and you're black and blue all over. And I knew that would make a big difference if I could get access to quality exosomes and stem cells. And Dr. Khan brought me some of the latest technology in that area, and it immediately reduced both the pain but also the inflammation, and I think really sped up the healing process. Some people say to me, why Dr. Khan? And I'd say, well, there are many great practitioners, but I think you want somebody that understands how the human body can be transformed, regenerated today. You need somebody who's on the cutting edge and who's hungry and driven and constantly finding those answers. As I already said earlier when you asked me, I think we all need a system, not something to do once in a while, that's constantly allowing ourselves to rebuild this body, regenerate this body, build the energy and strength and vitality, reduce the inflammation as the source of most disease, and having somebody that really is focused on that for long-term vibrancy and knows your personal goals, somebody that knows what you're trying to accomplish. Everyone's different, understands your body and what your challenges are and what are great solutions. To me, having somebody who can do that for you on a regular basis is you got to find somebody that you're going to really confide in and work with. And I found Dr. Khan to be really brilliant in this area. Again, highly recommend him.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Dr. Khan would like to open the room to any questions, so please place your hand up.
Hi, Dr. Khan. Nice to meet you. I actually work with Kash Khan.
Who?
Kashif Khan.
Oh, gosh.
That's
Oh,
the
cool.
connection, yeah.
Nice.
I wanted to ask you my personal question. So my wife has got a pituitary tumor, prolactinoma, that has essentially cut off her estrogen supply, and we don't know for how long. But we also got diagnosed with osteoporosis recently. So I'm guessing it's been quite a while with not knowing that's been happening. Have you seen anything clinically that's been able to help with, I mean, it's almost two issues, right? So it's like tumor and the osteoporosis.
Yeah, we have a immunologist I work with in Europe who has some intranasal peptides and other modalities to help shrink brain tumors. Like he's used them for glioblastoma and whatnot. And so you could potentially use that. And then also, obviously then there's a whole HRT stuff, which is a whole other, hormone replacement and everything like that. But I would, if you reach out, I could probably connect you with that. Because obviously I'm not a cancer specialist, but I know some really good cancer doctors around the world who do these cutting edge therapies.
Okay, and follistatin, does it have any efficacy with building back the bone, so the cytoclast?
We did see in the clinical trial, we've only done a phase 1, but we did see significant increase in bone density consistently. There's also a supplement called AlgaCal. Have you heard of that one? Yeah, that's been shown also to increase bone density and obviously resistance training. But follistatin can definitely be a helpful way to, let's say, add on more muscle and bone density.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Please place your hand up. Any questions? Oh, very good.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there any application for Alzheimer prevention, for example?
Yes. I mean, intelligence preservation is one of my areas of interest just because I value my brain and I'm always curious about how I can keep a mental edge. And so there is something we do called cord blood plasma, which has been shown to decrease neuroinflammation, and it also helps to slow down cognitive decline or even reverse cognitive decline in some certain cases. But we combine it with the mu cells as well, because of course the mu cells are also going to go to the brains and help with neuroinflammation. And then there's different intranasal peptides that we can use as well. For example, there's one called CLANC, which is which is basically kind of like a nootropic. It increases BDNF, like brain-derived neurotrophic factor in your brain. So there are basically things that we can do, let's say in the regenerative space. And then we're also working on Clotho gene therapy, Minicircle, the company I work with. So Clotho is a really cool peptide. It's made primarily in your brain and in your kidney. And people who have higher levels of Clotho naturally have a higher IQ by 6 points. And they have a significant reduction of decreased risk of Alzheimer's, even if they have the ApoE4 gene, like both of them. So Clotho is super protective, and you can get that as a peptide for now, but we're going to have a gene therapy for that hopefully later this year.
So how do you call it, Clotho?
Klotho.
Okay, anyone? Yes?
Dr. Khan, thank you so much. I totally share your mission for spreading good news and good work. Just on a point of detail, our findings are that the nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide full molecule also permeates the cell brain, so is an alternative, albeit perhaps more costly than the NMN precursor. The intuition being that the body doesn't have to add anything to that precursor to create the NAD molecule. You just deliver the NAD molecule directly. So just sharing the learning and looking forward to collaborating together, and really thoroughly enjoyed your presentation today. So many concepts put so clearly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you do that as an IV?
So we have research that shows that the intravenous delivery achieves the same bioavailability, like say equivalent as IV. It just diffuses through the fat and then hits the bloodstream. So as a practical matter, if you're a busy individual, sub-Q's best or fastest or optimal.
I'm a huge fan of NAD patches, for example.
We've talked about it. Yeah, loading the needles, absolutely.
Yes, exactly. So I have a peptide manufacturing company that is making NAD patches, and those should be available later this year too. So I'm a big fan of that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, Doctor. Could you tell me, is there any research done to gene suppression in the case of like trisomy 21?
So, sorry, what's the question exactly?
So, do you have any gene suppression?
Oh.
Sorry, gene suppression?
Oh.
For like in cases of like trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome?
No, that would be like a CRISPR technology, and there's a group out of Harvard. I forgot the name of but they're working on very precision gene editing. So, for example, if they want to suppress a specific gene or cut out a specific gene, they'll be able to do that. So it's around the corner. So I don't think it's that far away, but we don't personally have that yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Doctor. As I mentioned to you, we run one of the biggest academic health systems in the country, including a medical university. I wanted to know from you, is there any educational institution that is going towards educating on longevity? Because as of now, education in healthcare is mostly on prevention and curing disease rather than teaching on longevity itself. And from your experience, so we are doing very advanced things, including AI. We have a college of AI, which is the first in the world when it comes to healthcare. But anything that you've learned over these years about educating in longevity, I think that you've learned this by yourself, not through medical school.
Yeah, I basically work with different scientists around the world and different doctors, and we haven't formally made it yet, but one of the plans, we're working with Everwell, which is essentially Sheikh Sultan, it's a RADA and Sheikh Sultan, and they basically have, at least verbally, said that they will allow us to design a curriculum with Sharjah University to make a potentially a regenerative medicine bachelor program or longevity, focus, let's say aging, and potentially residency and fellowship training as well. So there's nothing as of yet, maybe in a few years.
We can offer you the same.
Okay, I'd love to. I'm a big on education. I was a professor at University of Toronto, but over there, the students love me, but let's say the powers that be, they just don't want to change. So to start something over there would take like a decade.
Wonderful. Is there any more questions? Yes.
Hi, Dr. Khan. Can you hear me? Is that good? So I know many of us here are probably the world's largest guinea pigs in terms of the COVID vaccine, the vector.
Unfortunately, yes.
So I was just trying to see how I can frame what I want to say. Basically, I know it's an individual consult to do with each and every one of us because each of our bodies are different, immune system and all of that is different. Haven't our brilliant vaccinators, are there something that's out there that we know we could have, as generically as this was put into us, that we could have, that would boost our immune system or protect it?
Well, there are protocols that have been established for vaccine injuries, and we do have one that we use. There's a bunch of supplements, but let's just say the easiest and the most effective, I think, at this point is a device called in-use pheresis. INUSPHERESIS. It's a long word. It's a technology from Switzerland that uses a special filter that they found in the Indian Ocean. It's like this algae that scrubs your plasma. It basically cleans your blood. And you sit there for 2 hours, and it goes in one way, comes out the other, and it filters out viral particles and spike proteins as well, from my understanding. And it can be combined with something like IV Weber laser, which is another modality, to basically get rid of these spike proteins in your body. So you need to remove the stuff, obviously, as opposed to just getting your immune system stronger, which can be helpful. But unfortunately, if these things are floating around in your body and causing an issue, you need something to remove it. So I think my recommendation for now is in-use It's not super accessible. There is one in UAE. It's in Abu Dhabi. And then they have a bunch in Europe.
What was the name again?
INUSPHERESIS. It's like a spelling bee.
Hi, Dr. Khan. Thank you for your presentation, which was really good. I just wanted to check, is there any regenerative therapy for people with IBD, like eventually ulcerative colitis?
Yeah, because IBD is just an inflammatory condition. It comes back to my example I was saying with rheumatoid arthritis, right? So instead of giving you a biologic, we basically regulate the immune system, which you can do with a combination of peptides and just intravenous stem cells. The mu cells especially work better, obviously, and they help to balance your immune system. And it's called basically shifting your body from a pro-inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory state. And it actually changes this gene expression, or what's called the cellular signatures of the immune system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Also, can I please have a round of applause for Dr. Khan for
thank you, everyone.
everything he's done today? And everyone, thank you so much for sitting in there. If you'd like to join us for the Human Garage, that will be outside near the banyan tree. Okay, so refresh yourselves, get comfortable. And we'll see you out there.
Thank you. Okay.
You guys will stay.
You're not going to see the garage.
I want to just ask him something.
See you there.
Yeah, I'll see you outside. How are you? How are the kids? Very good. How are you doing?
I wish I had time. Then you make time, but it's a bit too late. And then you try to make up the time.
Ovdje isto ženskica šta je bila na puno jučer. Samo iz druge kose što je